Producers, here are 5 reasons that the MAutoDynamicEQ from Melda Production is just the best EQ money can buy. It's got automatic resonance detection and removal, pitch tracking, frequency masking and collision detection and auto cleanup, external sidechaining capabilities, and easy EQ matching. This is going to be a really long video, so buckle up and use the chapter notes in the video description if you want to jump to a particular section, but we're going to go through all of those in detail right now. Let's go ahead and jump into MAutoDynamicEQ from Melda Production. All right, let's go ahead and check out how to automatically detect and remove resonances using MAutoDynamicEQ. This is the track I'm working on. Pretty gnarly, but I've got this really wonky sort of lead sound. Now, my ears are telling me that there might be some resonances in there that are a little bit too harsh. Now, one approach might be to really boost this up and, just try to find a resonance this way. And by the way, if you turn auto listen on and then click, you'll be able to solo that. Like maybe that's it, and then I could just hit invert and then, really crank up the Q and do it that way. Now you could do that for as many resonances as you want, or you can let MAutoDynamicEQ do it for you. So I'm gonna come in and just reset back to default here, and then hit analyze. And by the way, this is in the automatic EQ section. If you don't see it, you can just click right there to open it up. Now, once you've analyzed, and this is sort of settled or averaged out your EQ curve here, you want to hit stop analyze. If you don't do that and then try to hit remove resonances, which is the button right below it, you won't get anything. You have to stop the analyzation process and then hit remove resonances. And you can see here that we were actually pretty close to what MAutoDynamicEQ has detected. So let's go ahead and play that and bypass it. Now, it's done a really good job, but it might have removed too much. I don't want to remove all the character. I just don't want it to be harsh in my ear. Now, if I come into the bands, the quick access to the bands, you'll see that my gain is not, movable. I can't alter the gain setting here. If I click right here, and that's because I'm on a notch, which is a resonant filter, if I want control over the gain to remove a little bit less of the resonance, I can change that to peak, and then I can increase the Q, so we're still getting a super narrow band, and then I'll have control over the gain. And I can do that for each of these. If I come in, just peak, and so on, we can change it that way. But there's actually an easier way to do it. And of course, you have all of the options. Maybe there's harmonics here. You can turn it into a dynamic EQ. Like, so many options. There's actually an easier way to do it from the jump, though. And that's what I want to show you. I'm going to come in and reset it again to default, close this. And this time, before hitting analyze, inside of the automatic EQ section, there's a settings box. This is different than settings, say here, or settings up here. It's its own set of settings. This is one of the things I love about Melda plugins is you can get so granular. Everything allows you to do anything you want, which is why this is one of my favorite EQs. So I'm going to hit settings. And then obviously I can add more bands too, by the way. I can change this up to 7, which is the max you can have in MAutoDynamicEQ. But I can also use peak filters for resonance removal out of the gate, so I don't need to worry about it. I can always just go in and adjust my gain from there. Probably the best look. And I can also roll off the top or the bottom if I wanted to as well. Say we don't want anything, look for resonances below this value. Just hit 0 here and go back. Now there's one other thing before I run this that I want to draw your attention to. Before hitting analyze again, there's a smoothness option here. If I really crank that up, watch what happens. And hit analyze. Look how smooth that EQ curve is. If I come out of here and then hit remove resonances, you'll see here that it's actually detected far less. And that's because this depends on the smoothness. Now, if I pull it way down, you see what's much more rigid here, and then hit remove resonances again, we've got a lot more. Now it's utilizing all 7 of the nodes and saying there's a bunch of resonance here. And that's just because the smoothness is way down, so it's really paying attention to details. But very rarely, I would say, do you want that. Somewhere around 4% is probably good. And then you're just going to get rid of the really harsh ones. And then, just like before, though, you want to come in and really decrease or increase the Q value. So you're only removing a little bit. And then come through, and if you turn on auto listen again, you can solo these. And by the way, if you want to solo it and bring it up, or you invert is probably a quicker way to do it. But if you hold shift and then drag up, you won't be able to move to the left and the right. And that way you'll stay right where the auto detect has told you the resonant frequency is, and you'll just be able to do it. But of course, if I'm on 3 or 3, for example, and then just invert, we'll actually invert them all, and then we can solo it that way. There you go. That's the quick and the dirty on removing resonant frequencies and tones that might be a little bit harsh from your music and your audio files. So let's go ahead and activate a filter node here. I've got it on this bass channel. Go ahead and just solo this bass. So let's say I want to dip the fundamental, or maybe boost the fundamental of this bass. If I pull up this frequency node here, it's boosting, but it's boosting right here even when the note actually goes below the frequency node. So the question is, how can I have this frequency node follow that fundamental around? And it's quite easy to do. So what I'm going to do is come over here to the modulator, and I'm going to click right here, and I'm going to go clear and learn. And I'm going to actually just take the frequency position and move it to the right and the left. I can click and drag in here, but this actually causes some issues, but the issues are easily fixed. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm just going to go like this, try to pull it back and forth. I'm going to click right here to stop it, open up the modulator, and this is what I was talking about. You can see here that I've learned the frequency and the gain position for this, and I don't want that. If I go ahead and enable this, if we look over here, you can see that that's moving. It's following this LFO path, but it's going up and down and to the left and the right. And I don't want it to go up and down, for instance, right now for this particular example. So I'm just going to click here, and now it's just moving to the left and the right, following this modulator. So I don't want it just to do this over this LFO period. I actually want to use the pitch information. So I'm going to click pitch, okay? And what we want to do is make sure we're using the whole value range here. I'm going to open up the detector circuit and go all the way down because we are tracking bass here, and just bring it all the way up. And let's just go ahead and play the bass now and see what happens. Oops. You see how this filter node is following the fundamental frequency? So now I can boost that however much I want. Let's say, maybe 2 decibels or something. And it's only boosting the frequency of the fundamental itself. So let's say I want to boost the 5th note of the bass. I can take, I can move up an octave if I wanted to. That's actually kind of where a valley is. So let's move this back down to 0. And let's say up a 5th would be 7 semitones. Let's go up an octave and a 5th and see where that is. So now it's following an octave above plus a 5th. And that's 7 semitones, by the way. And this is very helpful if you're trying to make that part shine through smaller speakers. Maybe it's a little bit too subby and we want a harmonic to shine through some of the smaller speakers like laptops and phones. We can take this, make the Q a little bit smaller. And it's going to follow along and only boost the actual harmonic that's being played rather than a static position. And that is so useful when you're trying to be super surgical and super precise. And it was incredibly easy to do. We have some other controls here. We can shift by sense. We can control, what's recognized in terms of detection. We can We can change the range over here. We have so much at our disposal to really make sure we're only boosting or cutting exactly what we're looking for, even if the note itself changes. And that's just phenomenal. That's pitch tracking inside of MAutoDynamicEQ, just one of the many, many incredible features of this incredible plugin. Frequency masking, frequency collisions, and how to remedy those to make your mix cleaner and make one instrument or a vocal or something stand out against something else that might have similar frequencies. So let's go ahead and jump into it. What we need to do is analyze two files. One is the instrument that we want to stick out in the mix, and the other one is the one we want to carve away from certain frequencies to make room for that other element, if that makes sense. So I've got these things color-coded inside of Ableton Live here. I've got a red and a green. And if you look down here, that's because that's what they're color-coded here. Though I'm pretty sure you can actually change all the colors if you wanted to get into it. We're going to stick with red and green for now. So what I have here is a flute and a kind of synth piano sound. And there's a little bit of frequency collision happening in the upper frequency of this piano that's masking or getting in the way of the flute. And what I want to do is use MAutoDynamicEQ to find those positions and have it automatically add a filter node to reduce the frequency in the synth itself. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing we want to do is analyze the source. The source is, in this case, what we want to stick out in the mix. And I have it, or the MAutoDynamicEQ, on that flute channel, okay? If I play the flute, that's what we're seeing here. So what I want to do is hit Analyze and let that play. But before I do that, I want to point out that you can actually use an audio file if I want to go ahead and just import an audio file. I can analyze a sidechain signal if I wanted to. I can draw my own line. I can load a preset like pink noise if I'm using this for mixing and mastering. Any of these genres, if you come in here, you've got like, Young Jeezy and stuff like that in there. So some real world examples of EQ curves. But something like this is usually more for EQ matching and for mixing and mastering, so we don't need to worry about it. So I'm just going to go ahead and analyze this flute. And all I did was click Analyze, and now I click Analyze again, and now it's baked inside of there. It's an EQ curve that's been saved, and I can save that if I wanted to. And what you're looking to do here is hit the Analyze button and let it play until it stops jumping up and down and kind of averages out the EQ curve. And that's what happened. So now I need to analyze the target. And there are a number of different ways you can do this, but one of the simplest is just to take the whole plugin and drag it on that second channel. And if I play this now, you'll see that it's coming up there. And now I just hit Analyze Target and let that, again, average out. And then it averaged out. So I click Analyze again, and now I have my two frequency curves. And you can actually see that right around here, there is some competition. Now, because of how high up in the spectrum this is, it's not necessarily a terrible thing. You really want to look out for stuff down here on the lower end where there's not as much wiggle room for competing frequencies. But for this particular example, this will be just fine. So what I want to do is use the auto equalizer section. And if you don't see it, what you want to do is click right here. You can see it says auto equalizer. Click right there and you'll see the panel. And that's the same thing with the band section here and really anything else over here. Before I hit separate, which is what I'm trying to do, I want the green to not sound like the red. I want to come into settings and I want to choose how many bands this is going to add. And I can go up to 7. That's how many bands you are allowed inside of this plugin. I'm going to leave it at 4 for now. And we can also roll off the lower end and say, hey, don't add any bands below this frequency, or don't add any bands above this frequency. So let's just do that for funsies, hit OK, and then just hit separate. And look what's happened here. It's added these EQ nodes. It's added 4 of them, in fact, as we set before. It hadn't added anything above my settings, anything above 4,000 or anything below 187, though it wouldn't have anyway. That was just for kind of demonstration purposes. But it's dipped down. There's kind of a peak right here. And what I said before is we want the red to stick out more in the mix. So we're carving out frequencies of the green. You can see right here, this is definitely conflicting with this bump right here. And there's another one right here that's conflicting with that bump. And that's what it's done now. So let's just go ahead and listen to these and see if we can spot the difference. I'm going to go ahead and solo them both and then bypass the plugin using the bypass button. So the flute is definitely sticking out more, and that's exactly what we're looking to do. However, maybe it might be making it a little bit too hollow. So I can come in here to any one of these filter nodes. 4 doesn't look like it's doing anything, so I can just go ahead and turn it off. 1 might be cutting too much, or it may be too broad of a Q value, so I can easily come in here and change the percentage, maybe reduce it. And another way to kind of reduce the effect this is having is coming to the dry wet. And as I pull this down, you'll see that these become less and less. And that is essentially all you need to do to remove frequency masking that MAutoDynamic has picked out from the 2 analyzed signals that you fed into it. There's also a smoothness button. If you change the smoothness, you'll get broader lumps here, and then you just need to hit separate again. And it's added 4. And you can see it's actually taken out a bigger chunk. So that's actually too much smoothing. And if we bring it down, let's come into settings and actually just turn it down to 3. Hit OK, and then hit separate again. And you'll see here, so we could actually probably do a 2. I can just get rid of this third one. And here we go. Again, pull back on the dry wet. And we've just helped the mix along very quickly, very easily. And you can imagine as you start doing this with more and more instruments, you're really carving space for whatever instrument you're trying to carve space for surgically. If I go ahead and solo this bass, we've got 1 filter node here activated. And if you want to see the other bands, you just got to click right here and you can see we can have up to 7 bands. But what I want to do is make it dynamic. And to do that, we can do it right here. All right, if we want to expand or compress, that's how you do that. But you can also click right inside of the visualizer here and add and take away or change the dynamic gain here as well. And the Q value is right here on the sides. You can use your mouse wheel over the filter node itself or just click and drag over here. And of course, we have one down here. So if I go ahead and pull this down, you can see that it is dynamic and happening quite well. That's very straightforward, but the question is, what if I want for, our kind of side chaining the bass to leave room for the kick drum? We want to do that with a dynamic EQ node. How do I go ahead and do that with MAutoDynamicEQ? And it's very, very simple. I'm going to right click the node itself. And if you come over here to the panel and just check sidechain, exit out. And then if I come inside of Ableton Live, I want to go ahead and take that from the kick. And then let me come in and actually turn the kick on so you can hear it, just so you know what's going on. So there we go. I've got my sidechain. It's only happening when the kick is happening. And one thing I want to tell you, if you're going to be using a dynamic EQ to do this kind of sidechaining, you want to have the gain set to 0. And that way, if the kick isn't happening, no frequencies are being carved from the bass. If I left it down here, this is always going to be taken away from the bass. I'm losing a lot of my sub end here. No matter what, it's going to be carving this amount of amount. We don't want that. We want it to be at 0 all the time, except for when the kick is happening. And then we can, of course, adjust the dynamics. We can adjust the Q value. Again, if we right click right here, we can actually change the type of filter it is. Something like that might work a little bit better, but maybe turn down the Q. Boom. And that's how simple it is to get an external sidechain trigger for the dynamic EQ modules inside of the MAutoDynamicEQ from Melda Production. So we've got 2 tracks here. I've got my pre-master over here, and then I've got a perfectly EQ'd master that I want my pre-master to sound like. And what we want to do is analyze the target, and I've color coded them so you know. The target is whatever you want to apply an EQ curve to, and the source is whatever you want to take an EQ curve from. What I want to do, and I actually want to try a different method of getting the second EQ curve, because I've already showed you how to take this and just kind of drag and drop it onto this channel. What I want to do is just take a second dynamic EQ curve. So I've got an MAutoDynamicEQ on both channels now. And for this second one, I want to go ahead and capture the source. So I'm going to go ahead and click this and let the track play out. For this particular tutorial, I'm just going to go ahead and play the drop. Depending on what you're trying to accomplish, it will depend on what part of the song you sample or if it's the entire song all together. But I'm just going to go ahead and do it this way. And also remember from one of the earlier tutorials, we can always click right here. If I stop that, I can pull in sidechain data. I can draw a curve. I can load a track by just finding it in my file browser. Or I can actually use a preset over here, like pink noise is a very common frequency profile to use when mastering. But I'm going to go ahead and close that, and we're going to go ahead and just analyze the source by playing it out real quick because it's super short. And we really don't even need to play this whole thing. It's pretty much just 2 sections here that loop. The frequency curve settled down and kind of averaged out. So if I click right here, I've got that now. So before I showed you how to just take this and drag it and drop it on the other channel, but there's another way to do it. If you click the toolbar section here, you can actually copy this EQ curve. It will actually copy all the parameter states. So I haven't tweaked anything out. All I did was gather the source curve. I'm going to jump back in here, open up the original, click tools and click paste. And now I have the source EQ curve pasted in the second instance of the MAutoDynamicEQ. I can close out of here and we can go ahead and capture the target. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Go ahead and stop it, click again, and now I've got my 2 EQ curves. So what I want to do is equalize the green to sound like the red, but before we do that, let's click the settings and decide how many bands. We can go up to 7 bands, which is the max number of bands the MAutoDynamicEQ has, or we can leave it around 5 or 4. And we can always come back in and change that later. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I also want to note that we can say roll off the bottom. Let's say I really like the way my bass sounds. I don't want to EQ the bass differently because maybe I'm tweaking things out that have to do with the actual key and notes of the bass. So if I want to pull this up to something like, 200 hertz or something, wherever my bass line kind of stops, looks like it's right around 100, so I can actually pull this down. I can do that, and then it won't add any filter nodes down below that value. So let's do that. I'm going to hit OK, and boom. So you see that it hasn't added any EQ nodes below that 100 mark, which is what I set, which is perfect. It has tweaked out over here at the higher end of the spectrum and really kind of made a cut over here in the mid-range and then boosted up right here. And you can see that quite clearly over here in the actual 2 curves that we can see here inside of the spectrum. And really, that's all there is to it. Now I can come in and, roll back on it if I want. There's a smoothness slider. If I pull this up, and hit that equalize button again, it will change. And maybe I think 3 EQ nodes is probably enough. Hit OK and just click again. It will get rid of 1. And I really come in and start doing whatever I need to do to make the EQ curve sound similar. Obviously, we can't go for 100% match here. That'd be ridiculous. If we bring the smoothest way down, we can actually start to really see different spikes and stuff. But we don't want MAutoDynamicEQ to pay attention to that stuff. This is a little bit more general, and let's just see what it sounds like. And there we go. We've made some general changes to the EQ curve to better fit the profile of that other track. This is very useful for just trying to get your master or your pre-master to sound something like a professionally mixed track, or if you're trying to get your album to be more cohesive and less kind of different in terms of EQ. That's something else that's normally done or has been known to be done. And it's just one more tool in the MAutoDynamicEQ toolbox that you can use in a myriad of fashions. You can also use it on just a snare drum, for example. There's a snare that you like from a Skrillex track. He makes really, really great snares, and you want to emulate the EQ curve of that. It's very simple to take that EQ curve and apply that to your own snare to maybe boost up the body of it to make it sound closer to those big, huge snares that he produces and designs. Obviously, that and this kind of full track profile are two different methods of using the EQ match feature, and they're both, perfectly valid and perfectly good to use. And it's super easy to do using this plugin. All right, so there you go. If you made it this far, give yourself a pat on the back. This is an incredible EQ. I meant what I said in the beginning of the video. It's just so versatile and has literally features that entire plugins, that's the one thing they do. It's all inside of this incredible plugin. Shout out to Melda. Let me know in the video description if you agree. And as usual, I'm Joshua Casper, and I'll see you in the next video.